baby face my entire life. Until my hair started to turn gray, I kept getting carded.
What?
For years in the scene, I've been telling people, I've been doing SM for 20 years! I realized last year, as I turned 48, that meant sometime this past September was the 30th anniversary of the day I walked into the Hellfire Club for the first time. Because I figured you had to be 18 to go there, and I turned 18 that August. And I was going to college in September, so I was an adult. And I had my ID, and I bravely got my ass to Lower Manhattan, walked down those filthy streets, past the tranny fag whores, with my doobie, getting up the courage, walked in there, plunked down $5, and Lenny Waller took one look at me and said, "Where are you going, little girl?" And I was like, "Nowhere." I'm lost. Went back to Queens. Whereupon, I dialed some number that probably sounded like 555-1212. And it was a kinky phone sex line. Whereupon, I would talk all night with people who were sometimes actually doing this shit and sometimes just talking about it all night. And that's how I started playing. So instead of going to the public SM club, surrounded by people who would have looked out for my safety, I would meet up with strangers and either invite them to where I lived, or I would go to where they lived and play with them. Because that was so much safer. I'm old. I am not old guard. Although you may notice I'm wearing my old guard blue boots of consideration. I call them this because some wackadoodle from the West Coast wrote a book about a dozen years ago or so, or maybe more, maybe 30 years ago, where she claimed that, you know, the old guard in the leather tradition would collar people temporarily with a blue collar. That's funny. I mean, if you buy old guard shit from the beginning, and you shouldn't, all right, at the very least you should say, well, yeah, they all wore black leather and rode Harley-Davidson motorcycles and then ran into the woods, got drunk, beat the shit out of each other, and fucked their brains out. That's old guard leather. Yeah. It did not include people of color. It did not include women. It did not include trans people. It did not include femmes. It did not include gender queers. Why? Because there were no gender queers. We didn't have that term. And by the way, if you called them queer, they'd probably beat the shit out of you. They did not carry flags. They did not wear bright cloisonné pins like you pick up at Disney. All right? If we had one group of absolute oldie-guardie leather guys, they were a bunch of fags in a bar who fucked each other. And then when someone new came in the bar, they said, let me get this one. In order to be in this bar, you have to suck my dick. Oh, pretty good, huh? And then the old guard was born. So I think it's pretty fucking funny that these days, mostly heterosexual people have this hard-on for an idea of old guard. Let me tell you what is old guard for me. You know what old guard for me is? Meeting a complete stranger and trusting them with your body. As opposed to you lucky young gender-fuck queers who grew up on an iPhone and you're like, oh my god, I can get this person's entire personal history of FetLife in 2 seconds. I can get 10 references from everyone who knows them, and by the way, look at their GPA, very disgusting. You have pictures, you have videos, you have bios. You guys are like writing everything on blogs, except I'm sure blogs aren't it anymore. I'm sure you're all twitting at each other. I went to a dungeon last year, and there was a woman getting pierced with this gorgeous starburst design on her back with, you know, different colored cords being run through it and bells being hung from it, and she was tweeting the experience. I don't even know what to say about that. I hope that the people who were reading her tweets were like, wow, that's hot. Tell me more. Oh, that's 140 characters. I'm old. This is Looking for Mr. Preston. Anyone know who John Preston was? He's a dead guy. He's a dead white male. He was also a dead gay white male. This is John. Hot. Except he was this New England fag who wore Docksiders and wrote one of the hottest queer fucking novels of SM of all time, Mr. Benson. Now, when I read Mr. Benson, I stole a copy of the book from someone's library, and I took it home, and I ran in, and I'm all dressed in my leather because I'm just coming home from the vault, and I'm like all sweaty, because I did eventually go in, and I'm all sweaty and disgusting from having played and blah, 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 and I'm reading the book in the hallway in my house. And I'm reading the book, and I'm reading the book for about an hour. Standing in the hallway, I didn't even take off my jacket. And then, it suddenly turned into a situation comedy. In the beginning, it was all like, oh, hot leather sex, every chapter is hotter than the other, and then, oh, wait, and then he's kidnapped by white slavers and taken to New Jersey with the Marlboro Man. I think I'll pee. So years later, I was writing porn for this publisher called Masquerade. Poo, poo, poo. And it just so happened that I was putting together Leather Women, Leather Women 2, as a matter of fact, the first publication place for someone you may have heard of, Toni Amato, which I didn't realize until recently when I was told that I was the first person to publish Toni. Go me. Obviously I see genius early. But anyway, so I was doing Leather Women 2, and my publisher was doing a book by John Preston. They were bringing back Mr. Benson and all of his short fiction. So John came to New York for this big release party that was held at Paddles. And I was like, oh my God, publisher man, I want to meet John, I want to meet John Preston so bad. And he was like, sure, come to the party. So I did. And I met John at the bar. 3 sheets to the wind. 3 sheets to the wind, he was one of the most erudite fucking queers I ever met in my life. Just brilliant and funny and sensitive and very kind to me once I told him that I was a writer. And he was like, you should be writing feminine dominance. And I was like, what? This from the man who wrote Mr. Benson? He said, do you know how many straight men out there want to get fucked by women? All of them! And I said, yeah, but you don't really, see much of that outside of the professional domination, scene. I don't see that they're, buying porn about it much, except for the professional stuff. And he's like, no. Have you ever read those gore books? and I said, yes, I have. They're about outer space barbarians who fuck girls badly. And he said, yes, I want to write a series that's like gore, but backwards. It's all women, and they're dominant, and they kidnap men from Earth and fuck them. But I'm not really good at writing straight sex scenes. We should write this together. And I was like, yes. This is so not what I was going to talk about. But so I said, yes, absolutely, we must write this. And we wrote back and forth about this a couple of times, and it never happened because he subsequently died. And I put together this, which was my tribute anthology about his life and his writing, of which I have 2 copies, and I'm giving one to Sassafras. Let me tell you why I'm doing that. It's because there's a part of me, and it's deep in our leather scene, our kinky culture, there's a part of me that's a really sentimental romantic.